Hey, podcast world, welcome to another exciting episode of FNO InsureTech. And when I say exciting, I am not kidding, right, Lee?
Your voice sounds so excited right now.
I'm titillated. I'm so excited.
Oh, good use of the word titillated.
And the reason is today, for the very first time, we go offshore.
Right.
Now we've had Canadian interviews before,
Yeah.
but this is the first time we've gone actually all the way across the Atlantic onto the shores of the UK into London for a interview with Leon Gauhman, co-founder of Elsewhen.
Yeah. I think it's very exciting. Last podcast, I thought we had actually interviewed someone from Israel. I was wrong. So this is our first time to actually have somebody from across the pond, as they say. Who came up with that? Across the pond. Was that America? Or was that UK?
Are,
England?
are you really asking this question? Maybe we
Do you
should.
know the answer?
Well, maybe we should put it out as a contest question.
I think that'd be great.
If you can identify to our listeners, if you can identify who actually coined the phrase "across the pond," you'll win an autographed picture of Lee and I.
Yeah. Will it be our actual picture or caricatures?
No, it'll be our actual picture.
That's even better.
So we'll see.
Yeah. What do they need to do, Rob? Maybe email us. Maybe go to fnoinsuretech.com
I think that
and email us.
I think that'd work good. Yeah.
Yeah. We would actually love that.
They'll get an autographed photograph and of any size that they would like. You name the size.
Life size.
Life size, no problem. We have that.
Yeah.
We possess that technology. We do actually. We can.
We do.
can
We
print
have
that.
we have a giant
We have a
printer.
giant
We could print
printer.
that for you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
everybody, I'm sure you're very excited about that. Today we have on Elsewhen. Elsewhen is a digital product consultancy, which is basically a company that somebody would go to and say, "Hey, I have this great idea for a digital product within a certain vertical," and they help you take it all the way from there to launch. Brilliant guys, all engineers who understand the landscape and work extensively in fintech and insuretech.
Yeah, and I think that I would really like to talk about what is InsureTech like over in England. You know, what is going on? Are they receptive to it? Is there pushback? Really, what is the overall atmosphere of InsureTech? So I think that'll be a great
Sure, and
conversation.
we'll even try to ask him what's going on with Brexit and how that might influence or impact insuretech in Europe.
That's a great question.
So, without further ado, let's get to our interview with Leon Gauhman, co-founder of Elsewhen. Hey, podcast world. We are here with a whole new chapter of FNO InsureTech, a whole new episode, and we're very excited because today we go out of North America
Yeah.
for the very first time.
Yeah.
And we have a guest from London, England, Mr. Leon Gauhman, founder and CEO of Elsewhen. How you doing, Leon?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. That's nice of you. Leon, tell our listeners where are you?
So I am in London, which is pretty spread out. So to triangulate me a little bit better, I'm in an area called Shoreditch, which is a part of East London, heavily gentrified part of East London, which is kind of been coined as the Silicon Roundabout, for better or for worse. And it's an area of London where there's a high concentration of technology companies and startups. And we're kind of also a stone throw from the city of London, which is an important financial services center, as I'm sure you're aware. So it's kind of a next neighborhood to the city, which was always neglected and and was relatively poor and etc. And it's now been gentrified fully and kind of the high tech area of the city.
So, in other words, now you can't afford to buy a place in that neighborhood.
Not even
where 5 years ago or 10 years ago you probably could have stole something, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
London been through that a few times, like any other major city.
So you're founder and CEO of Elsewhen. Why don't you tell us for a minute or two about Elsewhen, what you guys do, and kind of how you fit into the InsureTech world?
Sure. So just a quick correction. I'm a co-founder. So I have two other
Thank you. Thank
uh,
you.
founders, and I'm a director of product and strategy, which is kind of a CPO, CSO title. Here, a lot of times we use director, so like a finance director instead of a CFO, but it's a similar thing. We actually don't have a CEO, which is a different story altogether, but just to make sure that that is said straight.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
No worries. And Elsewhen is we're a digital product consultancy. So we work with the corporate sector, and we'll help kind of large corporate clients launch new products and services, or kind of in a change activity of kind of part of digital transformation. It's been coined and used heavily. And one of our key sectors is insurance. So we do financial services, and insurance is another important sector for us.
So tell us how a company would get engaged with you guys. Give us an example of what an InsureTech or a FinTech might use you guys for.
So a company would engage with us because they potentially want to introduce into their organization the type of talent, processes, and experience that Elsewhen has, or they might be which is a lot of times the case in the corporate sector. Corporates are looking for new ways of working, and some of them realize that sometimes it's better to get some of the opportunities and challenges outside to get new perspectives or work in a different way, etc. If it's a more kind of modern organization, so we work with the larger startups, kind of on the startup scale, then it's usually about finding a trusted partner that thinks and walks and talks in the same way, and taking something off the roadmap that is usually not the core activity, and helping to define and implement that and get that to market. So we, with kind of our bigger corporate clients, we position ourselves as an alternative to more traditional consultancies. So kind of the management consultancies, or kind of strategic design consultancies, or like the very big integrators. So we propose a model that is a little bit more modern, a little bit more akin to something that you would find in a modern technology company. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. I'm wondering if maybe you could walk us through some of the steps that you would actually take with a new company who comes on and wants to go through this digital transformation.
Digital transformation it's a big kind of sentence, a big kind of field that's been coined with
Sure.
this nifty kind of concept, which is, again, that's a very consultancy thing to do. The steps that we walk through is, for us, technology is technology, and customers are customers, and it doesn't really matter if they're your internal customers or your external customers. And we have huge respect for technology, because we and our history and everybody who's involved with us kind of rose from execution and from actually working in the kitchen and delivering things. So our typical engagement will help our clients to, a lot of times, to define what they're trying to achieve. So across strategy, product design, and technology, in a lean and agile process, to kind of what is the strategy, where are we actually going to, and that's kind of looking at an opportunity or a set of opportunities that an organization thinks are viable, clarifying some of the assumptions that be made, testing some things, and then creating something that is akin to a business case, that is akin to a plan of moving forward. And then we would work with the organization to actually take a first version of that to market, or take a first version of that to internal customer hands. And then we would scale up, and eventually, in most cases, hand over back control into the organization, hopefully with some learnings for them and some new technology, some new strategies, some new approaches. That would be a a kind of a general shape of a process.
So tell me I guess I'm looking to get a little more specific. What is a problem or a product or a solution that somebody would come to you and say, help us with this? What is something that you have actually worked on in the past that can help our listeners understand exactly what it is you
Well, it
do?
can be anything that is software, right? So if we think about it's
Software?
always software,
Okay.
it's always digital. So, it
Okay.
could be a telematics platform. It could be a new way of kind of using data to provide certain type of products. Like I'm kind of speaking in InsureTech and insurance context.
Right.
It could be a delightful customer experience. There's a lot of opportunity to improve things for customers in this sector. It always has a digital component. It's always about technology, and it's always about software, and it can be B2B, B2C. We love to think about consumerization of enterprise. That is something that we're really, really into. However, we work on a consumer side as well.
So would a client come to you and say, "I'm looking to build a piece of software. I need your help." Or would they come to you and say, "I have the software I want to use. Can you help us implement it?"
They usually come and say, hey, I have this really interesting idea,
Okay.
or I have a series of ideas, and how do I get this done?
I see.
Then we work with them to define how do you get this done. And sometimes what comes into the process and what comes out of the process is different, because we met customers, we put some prototypes in front of people, we tested some technology, and we realized and learned something together. And then once we have that learning, we understand, okay, how do we actually get this done? We work on a plan together, and then we start to release as fast as we can, really.
Sure. Sure. I mean, we have that in our own company where our executive team will get together and we'll be discussing a problem and an idea and like,
Mm,
wouldn't it be cool if we could do this?
mm.
Or, here's a problem that we have. I wonder where we could find a solution. There has to be a technology solution that can either be bought or devised for this problem that we have. And
So some of the work we do is sometimes looking at what's available in the market. So if you think about InsureTech, and I always look at fairly or not fairly, but I look at the insurance sector trailing a little bit behind the financial services sector.
well, I think we agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and being very similar. And one of the things that we see in financial services sector is that after the big bang, well, certainly here we had the open banking and PSD2 and companies that were forming just a little bit ahead of that to to take advantage of new regulatory flexibility and availability of data, and also change in the consumer sentiment, and forming companies that are very much consumer focused. And these folks, once they went into the market, a lot of them realized, hey, consumer is very hard. Selling to consumers is hard, and it requires a huge amount of firepower. And actually, the banks already have the consumer, they already have loads and loads of customers. So maybe we should try and pivot and sell solutions to the banks. So certain type of customer journeys or certain type of technology solutions are available. And then when we work with our customers, with our clients, we look at what's available out there, and we understand if, is that viable? Is that good? Is the team behind it understand what they're doing? They can take on board a significant, corporate client, and we create a kind of a well, because I don't have a better term, I'm going to call it a solution architecture of
A roadmap. A roadmap.
a little bit more on the solution side. So, what are we going to be building? What are we going to be buying? What can we collaborate on? This is exactly back to what you said. That some things are already there, and you should not reinvent the wheel. But also, some things that are out there might be not good enough or right, and it's actually better to build and own the technology.
You have a very interesting resume. from your past. Tell us how you guys came to Elsewhen, you and your co-founders, and a little bit about your history and how you guys got to Elsewhen and up to today.
So Elsewhen has been co-founded by three engineers, which is quite a distinct DNA that our organization has. So we have a director of technology who is obviously a CTO and used to be an engineer. There's me. I'm director of product and strategy. I also used to be an engineer. And our director of customer experience and design used to be an engineer as well. So it's a very kind of unique DNA in a landscape where a lot of people who deal with the strategic elements of technology have never ever written a single line of code and never worked on a product before. So we have a little bit of a different approach and view. Myself, I'm a weird engineer. I actually finished a degree in art.
Oh.
During my degree, I found that I can do really crazy stuff by writing code. So I started to build these algorithms that did all sort of crazy generative stuff. Essentially, that was my art, and I got a scholarship to pursue this in New York. But I found a job working in a tech company, and I just really got excited about solving problems and building things that people use. So I never pursued my art degree. I kind of got sucked into this, and spent a few years writing software in different languages, and I have relatively broad exposure as an engineer, a polyglot engineer. And then the three of us came together. We started Elsewhen, and Elsewhen started as a build shop. Give us specifications, you're going to get something on the other end that is fairly aligned with that. However, we understood that to be able to produce the type of output that we are happy with, that we think is good, we needed to control more and more of the building blocks. So we wanted to control the design, the product design, and and kind of create the requirements for the problem. And essentially, we drifted to strategy and kind of the vision and kind of the planning around that. We were very lucky to have Google as our first client.
Sure.
So on the back of that, it's a great company to work with. And on the back of that cash flow, we spent a few years building startups. So essentially creating new companies, new products with investors, VCs, and founders that don't have any experience in executing on product.
Wow.
So this is kind of interesting because when I say that now, even back then, especially to folks from the West Coast, a founder that starts a company and doesn't know his product was always like, what do they know then?
Right.
An unthinkable conundrum. It was an unthinkable conundrum. Here in London, there was a very common situation where you had entrepreneurs that don't have experience in execution but understand a business very well, or have a knowledge graph. And for example, in insurance, that could be a very common scenario. It's somebody who spent years and years in Lloyd's and then found a certain problem but never executed on product. So we would build teams around these guys and execute a few first versions, and then also participate in the business in terms of equity.
Uh-huh.
We realized quite quickly that unless we find a fund and we set up a fund, not find, but set up a fund, it's not really a business because you have to follow up. So unless you follow up, it's not a business. But the landscape around us started to change, and we kind of always feel like we're on the kind of knife edge of this wave where, in larger companies, not technology first companies like Google, but other companies, insurance, for example,
Right.
Digital and technology started to become a thing that the company has to deal with. Customer expectations are changing. Internal customers and external customers, kind of the digital native workforce is expecting different things from the tools that they're working on. Customers certainly expecting delight in their products. And on the back of that, it allowed us to build this digital product consultants in this practice where we bring processes and technologies and talent that is more technology oriented talent, so more kind of people you would find in Spotify or Facebook or the sophisticated tech organizations, and we bring them to the corporate sector, and we work on the problems that these guys have. So that's kind of what Elsewhen is in the history, really.
Fascinating. Fascinating. I'm very interested in the juncture of art and technology. And there's a lot of similarities, right? And a lot of differences. And I'm sure a lot of artists find technology to be maybe foreign or uncomfortable. Do, but in my own work of what we do in our company, I always try to think about it from an kind of a perspective of art, that we're trying to create art or make art. Do you bring some of your art sensibility to your work?
I have a very kind of Eastern approach to that. I do martial arts, and in martial art, it's an art, and it kind of in the East and in Japan, that's really really evident is that everything that you do, and you could be sushi chef, you could be a clay kind of burner, you could be making kind of clay objects, you can be anything, and uh, any type of activity that is human activity that has certain level of depth in it is always striving to become an art form, you know and I try and look at what I do in the same way, as trying to, I think as soon as you do something at a certain level of depth, dedication, and love, it becomes art, and it doesn't matter what that is. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I like that. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Let's let's talk about InsureTech in the UK, in London. Um, you said that you guys are playing in a lot. Obviously, London has a super rich history of insurance. Of course, the home of Lloyd's. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on in InsureTech in London.
Well, as I mentioned to you about our history, one of the first sectors we looked at when we started to look at the corporate sector was insurance, because it was so obvious. There is such a obvious opportunity for change. And we met, I'm not going to mention the name of one of the large insurance companies, and we engaged with some fairly senior people over, and they came over to us, and we had discussions, and then the whole fintech thing was just kind of waking up. We just started to realize that this is a real thing. There is this activity, there is this attack on incumbents, and we were chatting to the insurance guys, and we were going, "You don't think you guys are going to be next?" And the response that we got back then really shocked us, because the the actual quote was, "The eye of Zeran had not turned to insurance industry just yet."
Wow.
Interesting.
That's the quote, and we were sitting there going like, "Wow, this is amazing." And the feeling was that, and these were people that were, within this relatively, London, and has this history, it's hundreds of years worth of or organizational history in some of these companies. And these people were kind of like the cutting edge of innovation within that organization. I was saying, there is people within our organization don't believe that it's going to happen because of the regulatory protection, because
Yes.
the the regulatory walls will protect us.
Right. Right.
And that kept on repeating in a few other places where there were, and this is what I kind of alluded to earlier, that the digital natives and kind of people that are entering organization and rising in the ranks, are their expectations of technology and engagement of technology is different. And the feeling that we were given is that some of the people on the very top just don't believe that it's a thing. you know. But fast forward to today, I think the world is very different, and I think, things have matured, and I think there is no more denial, certainly. But I think insurance is relatively late to the game, and I think maybe there's an opportunity to learn a lot from other sectors. And I don't know if you're aware, but Lloyd's unveiled like a 146-page plan to try and again, like, it's within certain context, but to try to get things digital and online and etc. So I think there is a realization now, but it's a very slow moving sector.
It's a slow moving sector. When about how long ago was that conversation that quote came out of?
Maybe 3-4 years.
Yes,
So kind of beginning of fintech, I would say.
right. Here in the States, even the term InsureTech is relatively new, and but one of the big things that's happening here is a focus on innovation, and InsureTech has kind of been moved underneath that the innovation umbrella. And what we've seen a lot through the podcast is more and more carriers here in the States are embracing innovation initiatives, innovation departments, innovation organizations inside, or even building a separate lab, they call them sometimes, inside of the
Yeah.
company to focus on innovation. And InsureTech, gets brought inside of that. Is that kind of what you're seeing from a process standpoint in Europe?
I think we're kind of on the closing side of that circle. I think of that wave. I think in here there is, I think, uh, a bit more of a realization, but there will be a reckoning day, as a lot of other similar approaches have showed in other sectors, that there is a, there's issues with these models. And we certainly engaged in working with, and again, I can't really go into detail of names, but we certainly engaged in working within that context. And I think there is a bit of an understanding that there is an element of innovation theater in this, both on the activity out of these hubs, their relevance and their ability to embed back into the business. And also, I think on the side of the tech companies, the startups, and it's similar in banks, is, it's kind of like watching trees. It's like the tree and the ant, uh, a cycle in a young technology startup versus the time that it takes for a large organization, certainly as large as an insurance company, to make a decision. They're completely misaligned. By the time somebody could reply with an email on to set up a meeting, a startup could be born, exist, and die. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. As I'm thinking and listening to a little bit of differences between England and America right now in the insurance technology world, I think about privacy. And we've recently done quite a few podcasts on IoT devices and how insurance companies are working with insureds to install IoT devices in their home so they can react to data quicker, so that the insureds may not have to file claims, just allowing information to pass between the two entities freely. I want to ask, how is that working over in the UK right now? Do insureds want insurance companies to be in their home in real time? Is there a privacy concern? What is the overall stance there?
It's a very good question. I think there is a sharp difference at the moment, and I know that that's about to change because a piece of legislation on your side of the pond that I can't bring up the acronym, but here we have GDPR.
Right.
And GDPR is a fairly aggressive set of policies that hand the control of the data, of personal data, back to consumers' hands. And I know that there's this, there's a equivalent type of legislation that is on its way in California. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
I
in
believe that
California,
is
yes.
true.
So it really changes how organizations, how free organizations are, and the biggest kind of historically biggest beneficiaries of that were the technology companies. And how do they need to engage with their customers' data? I think that there is certain parts of the market and certain kind of contexts where this is actually a little bit outside the consumer sphere, and where these sort of solutions potentially have more business case or legitimacy. So, for example, we see activity here around telematics,
Right.
and kind of being able to and we dealt with the telematics kind of subject in a few contexts, both in consumer and B2B. And I think that there is activity within that of kind of using that data to be able to look at things at scale and be able to generate insights. With a On the consumer side, that is yet to be proven that it even works. There's some evidence that potentially telematics actually make people, the fact that they're there, they influence behavior in a certain way that kind of backfires the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that also within the commercial, the B2B areas, there's certainly successful initiatives for putting IoT devices into areas that are prone to risk, to be able to qualify that risk earlier and better.
One of the big things that we hear a lot about UK right now, of course, is Brexit. And I'm sure from the looks of things, it's certainly very big news where you live. And does that have an effect on anything we're talking about?
It has it has effect on everything. I think in a macro sense. Well, even GDPR, like for example, in and this is at the moment looks like it's not as close to a risk of happening as it used to be. But hard Brexit, for example, if it would happen, and hard Brexit meaning that we just jump off, float away as an island without any proper policy put in place with our previous European, as in Boris Johnson's words, our European friends.
Right.
UK becomes a third party, a third country when it comes into GDPR. So it's all the customer data that is held by companies here in the UK is treated completely differently. Is treated as a company as a country that is not trusted by the EU to have the same level of governance and processes as an EU country. So it's a huge thing. And the sort of business that Lloyd's does, and the sort of business that the insurance companies do, it's global. It certainly has huge effects. But hopefully, I hope that we will sort it out, and that we'll manage to avoid the really painful consequences of this decision, and we'll agree a deal, and then it's going to be a little bit less painful. But yeah, it has a huge effect on everything.
I just have to ask because I'm curious. Is the popular sentiment to leave, or I mean, do you have a sense? Is that a fair question? Is there a sense of that among the public? To,
I think it's
oh,
funny enough. It's very much like the current Republican administration in stateside. I think that sitting in East London, in the tech hub of the UK, it's very easy to say, yeah, everybody's against Brexit, but that's not the case. Half of the population voted to leave.
right,
So you could say that some of them might have changed their minds, maybe once they understood
right.
what actually is at stake. But yeah, half of the country, elected Trump, and half of the country voted for Brexit. It's undeniable.
Correct. And I think that's a great analogy, even though, people on either side of the argument might, look at it a little bit differently. The fact is that half the people feel this way. And it just takes half plus a little bit
Mm.
to be on the winning side of it. And that's exactly what happened in the U.S. and that's exactly what happened in the UK. So, well, listen, we are really appreciative for your time and for all the great information that you shared today. It's so interesting to us to know um, that companies like yours are involved in very similar projects and programs and concepts to what we're doing here. This is really a global, InsureTech is a global initiative, and it's good to know that it's alive and well and healthy, and has partners like Elsewhen in 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 Europe.
Yeah, I think it is. Insurance is a global industry, and I think there's so many great learnings on both sides, and so many great examples. And for example, the stuff that Lemonade does,
Right.
consumer side is incredible. I think that there's very interesting examples over here as well. Zego and Kuva, and there's I think there's a lot that can be learned on both sides, and it's an industry that can go and change drastically.
Well, listen, when we come do our London podcast roadshow, can we broadcast from the offices of Elsewhen?
Absolutely, would be honored. You're welcome to broadcast here. You're welcome to come visit us, and we'll certainly show you around, and the grand tour, walking you from Shoreditch to Deloitte's building. It's an interesting journey, and it's very insightful, I think, in terms of what is happening in London today.
That's really cool. Is there a pub somewhere along the way?
More than one, believe it or not.
Well, listen, Leon, again, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll look forward to meeting you in person sometime.
Same. If I'm over there as well, I would love to catch up. And thank you for having me.
Hey, Lee, that was different and interesting, wasn't it?
I liked it a lot.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was really neat. It got me thinking about how other parts of the world are working through InsureTech or even FinTech.
Right.
Because we were at InsureTech this year, and they announced that they were having a
Singapore,
InsureTech in
Asia.
Singapore
Right.
next year. It seems like there's just a whole different way to do things, that maybe they're a little ahead of us in some and a little behind us in others, not in technology, but in where they're at in this world of InsureTech.
Their company, Elsewhen, is I wish we had some budget to employ a company like that with some of the projects that we're interested in
Right.
and that we talk about, right?
Right.
To have somebody who can help you take you through the whole process from concept, because coming up with a concept is one thing, but bringing it to market is a whole nother.
Well, that's true, and I think there's companies in America, obviously,
Sure.
who do that,
Sure.
and I think that it's a very interesting take on working through these problems, being able to find creative partners, being able to create proof of concept, being able to actually use data to test it. I think it's neat. I think it's needed to help us move forward in this world of uncertainty to find out exactly where we're going.
Interesting story that he told about meeting with some insurance people just 3 or 4 years ago who were,
Right.
it sounded like, if I can use these, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it sounds like there was some resistance to technology change um, because of the regulatory protections, if you will, that insurance enjoys or deals with, which we hear here as well. But I think that all of that has
We
all of
do.
that has pretty much fallen away. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I think all of that has pretty much fallen away. I think that 8 years ago we heard a lot of that. We heard some pushback, and well, that's not us. We don't need to worry about that. But I think
hmm
that's gone, and I think that the UK is coming to realize
Sure,
that as
sure.
well.
So we're real grateful to Leon. It's great to have an opportunity to speak to somebody. It's amazing that we can just have a podcast with somebody who's in London,
Yeah, just a
and
just a chat,
a cup of tea, you might say,
cup of tea.
a cup of tea. Anyways, today is Halloween for those of you who are keeping score at home, and everybody in Waco, you might want to know, is in costume, but not
I'm
here in
not in
California.
costume, Rob.
I'm dressed as an old cranky guy.
Well, that is your everyday
It's not
costume.
a costume. Okay. Anyways, we thank Leon and everyone at Elsewhen for making this happen, and we appreciate you being with us today. And as always, the way that you can support us the most is to um, subscribe to our podcast, or maybe to do business with 470 Claims, who is our sponsor and employer. And until next time, we'll sign off the way that we always do by saying,
Goodbye, everybody.